Hello and welcome to Reportage. This is Danish bin Nabi. In today's segment of Reportage, I shall have a discussion about a recently released book, the title being Shi'ism in Kashmir, a history of Sunni Shia rivalry and reconciliation. This is the first major research on the minority Shia community of Kashmir. And to discuss about this, we have with us the author himself, Hakim Samir Hamdani. Mr. Hamdani, welcome to Reportage.
Thank you, Ji. Thanks for being here.
Mr. Hamdani, let me begin by asking you a simple question. Is this new research an anti-Sunni book?
I mean,
Because this goes against all the established narratives of the two communities of Kashmir. Is it so?
I mean, generally when you do an academic book, you do not seek to glorify, you do not seek to demonize anyone. A book which would be anti-anything would not be worth its weight in any academics course. So I don't think how you get an idea how someone say this is either anti-Shia or anti-Sunni.
So my assertion that the book is anti-Sunni is wrong.
I mean, I don't know how anyone could even make that assertion. You do an academic book because of the fact that you're interested in a certain field, of study, and you want to rework in terms of the sources that are there. But you don't write a book against anyone. I mean, that's not how you do it. You don't do anything.
But you have written against the book Waqiyat-e-Kashmir by Khwaja Muhammad Azam Didmari.
I mean, I don't write against any book. You critically appraise a book, a work. Khwaja Muhammad Azam Didmari is a historical figure. His book is a history of Kashmir. It's a general history of Kashmir. So anyone who's basically looking to conceptualize the past of Kashmir, who's looking to work on the past, needs to work with the text. What is the text and what is it saying? So you need to critically appraise it.
You have critically analyzed his book.
Yeah.
You write, and I quote, Didamari in his book carefully avoids mention of Ali, the first Shia Imam, in his narration of the encounter between Bulbul Shah and Rinchen, King Rinchen.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
is this the critical evaluation of an historian and a book?
Yeah, that's true, because what you're saying is Didmari is a product of a certain time. He's writing in a certain time, a time period. His book is situated in a certain milieu, a cultural milieu, a religious milieu. So once you appreciate his work, once you critically appraise his work, you do see what are the biases and the prejudices that are inherent in any work. So in that sense, Didmari's work is an important history of Kashmir. You cannot ignore it.
But you have completely negated the book all through the first chapter.
No. I mean, I'm just saying my book is about 19th century Kashmir. It's not about 17th century. It's not about 15th century.
But it gives a complete different...
Please do listen to me for a second. Let me try to explain it. My book is about 19th century Kashmir, which is a fractured society as far as the Muslim society of Kashmir is concerned. So there is a split both in terms of the urban morphology, both in terms of the competing narratives that you have from both the Shias as the Sunnis. So what is the origin of that textual bias? And in positioning Didmari, I am locating that bias wherein Didmari refers to Shia as a Rafizi repeatedly. So that is a textual bias which is inherent to Didmari as a historian. You can't ignore Didmari.
And which was subsequently taken by the other authors, Kashmiri authors?
Many of them, and I do refer to them, but there was also an example like you have an author by the name of Aslam. His work is Gawhar Alam, which negates these differences in a manner which is more in tune with how we approach an academic work today. But Didmari does set the course of an understanding of past which can be posited as a Sunni understanding of Kashmir's history.
So Mr. Hamdani has critically evaluated Didmari.
My work is not about Didmari. Please do understand.
Obviously, it's not about
my
Didmari,
work is about
but your major chunk of the first chapter deals with Didmari only.
And no, you're again getting wrong. What I have said in introduction is that Didmari is the one who is basically positioning the future, the sort of our vision towards past. And in locating that past, he is someone who's going to be followed by later generation of historians, even as contemporary even today. So Didmari is important in that sense. The question is, what is Didmari? what is Dedmarine saying? And why is there this sort of a discourse wherein Dedmarine sees past, especially the Sultanate period, as a binary between a Shia and Sunni divide?
Mr. Hamdani, point well taken. You also write in your book that the rivalry between Shia and Sunni started from the politics of Khanka. Kindly elaborate on this.
I mean, where is, let's say, any historian getting his basic information about, let's say, the Sultanate period? It is from two genres. One is your Tarikh and one is your Tazkaras. And who are the people who are writing it? They are themselves situated within these Khanka systems, within these Sufi systems of orders. And a competition between rival Sufi orders is something that is universally spread around. I mean, if you see in the period we are talking about, which is medieval period in, let's say, 14th century, there is a rivalry even in the Persianate heartland between the Kubrawis and the Naqshbandis. So this is not something that is a fight for, it's basically a competing narrative wherein there is also accord. So you will also find there are many people like Sheikh Yaqub Sarafi, who is basically a part of many different Sufi orders.
I guess you have also critically analyzed this Naqshbandi and Kubrawi class in your,
I mean,
second chapter.
let me be very honest. My book is specifically about 19th century Kashmir and the Shia-Sunni relation in 19th century Kashmir. What I am positioning about is an understanding of the past which comes to the 19th century. The question, again, I would like to reframe it as, if in the 19th century the Shias and the Sunnis are seeing each other as antagonistic to each other, and they're projecting this sort of differences on a past, where is that understanding coming from? And who are the people who are basically responsible for that understanding? So if you remember, most of our tazkiras, most of our histories are originating from a scholarly elite. These scholarly elites are mostly urban, based in Srinagar, and they are more or less situated in one or another of a Sufi order. That's a fact.
Very importantly, I remember an anecdote from your book where you have written about a conversation between Aga and the Mufti chief, Mufti Azam, chief priest. And finally, it turns out that it's actually a conversation between Sheikh Makhdoom Sahib and Iraqi, the two saints.
It is about them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about them. Explain with the rivalry between, which you also write that both these Iraqi and Makhdoom Sahib belong to two different eras, and they were not the same.
They were not
from the same
They were not
eras.
contemporaries.
You write this in your book, but because of the history that has been written and the oral history mostly that has been going on in Kashmir, they have been portrayed as two enemies.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is again the projection of a past, wherein again, if you look, even if you see in Forrester's or the Wine's account, you find that somewhere it is mentioned that Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi is a disciple of Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom and he cheats him, which is not a historical fact. So, wherein do these narratives become a part of our life? Where do they become a part of our understanding of a past? So, historically, the two figures, Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom and Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi, never met. At the most, you could say Sheikh Hamza would have been a kid when Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi was in the prime of his career. But then in the sort of the contestations, which are a part of the public folklore, what I call the Dastan Goi traditions of Kashmir, the Dapan traditions, they compete with each other, and depending upon which sect or which faith base you are based in, the other comes as victorious. A certain part of this text is also inherent in the tazkiras which are coming out from the Suhrawadi circles. I mean, I do mention about in this my book. Again, I would like to mention that the medieval past of Kashmir is covered in 17 pages in my book in totality, because this book is not about medieval Kashmir, but this is basically about our notion of past, which in a certain way confirms the binaries of divisions when we come to 19th century Kashmir. So my interest in past is only about what are we projecting and why. So again, coming back to these two figures, you'll find that in the tazkiras coming from the Suhrawadi silsilas, there are repeated, I mean, I would say in certain cases, mentioning of Iraqi, but you don't find a similar thing happening in any Shia text. For example, you have the Tuhfatul Ahbab, you have the Bahristani Shahi, you have two histories. One is of Hyder Malik and one is of Hassan, you find the complete erasure of Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom from these Shia texts. On the other hand, if you see any Sunni texts, even coming down to Dedmari and then again Hassan Shah Khawami in the later part of the 19th century, there is a very negative portrayal of Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi. So these are again entrenched views which are not historical to the sense they were never contemporaries.
Mr. Hamdani, once again, while reading your book, I got an impression while reading about the controversy between Iraqi and Shah Makhdoom Sahab. The book portrays Shah Makhdoom as enemy of Shia and Iraqi as savior of Shia. Is this assertion find that
I mean,
there has been some animosity against Makhdoom Sahab as far as Shia community is concerned?
Let me say again in the sense, the two define competing visions and competing visions of Islam in popular society. So if you were to talk to a Sunni, I would find very rare, even in a popular discourse, leave aside an academic work, that someone would refer to Iraqi reverently. And I think to a certain degree the same thing is happening on the Shia side also. You will find that reverence.
So it's prevalent in both the communities.
It's prevalent in both the communities. I mean, let's see, even in the academy, you have a work of Isa Khan, a renowned historian, on Sufism in Kashmir. It doesn't somehow find a mention for the Nur Bakhshis within the broader category of the Sufism in Kashmir, and that is something which gets carried away in other contemporary academic works. So basically, it depends upon where you are situated. So in a popular memory, there are so many anecdotes of competition between the two figures. Again, as I said, and depending upon which community you belong to, your saint or your sheikh is the one who's victorious. So that is our understanding of a past. But then these are not historical facts. And what I would rather like to say, this is not also the lived reality of medieval Kashmir. If you see in terms of the Sultanate era, the idea that the society is totally divided as between a Shia society and a Sunni society is not a true understanding of that period. But again, I would rather like to repeat that this is not a study. My book is not about medieval Kashmir. It is again about Shia-Sunni relations, whether it's in conflict.
You have written about medieval Kashmir.
I have introduced medieval Kashmir because that is wherein you are framing your understanding of history. I repeat it again. This is not a book about medieval Kashmir. Where I'm referring to Dedmari, where I'm referring to the Chucks and Mir Shamsuddin Iraqi, Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom, 17 pages in all, I think, in the book, is primarily to pinpoint where are these notions of rivalries coming from, which are so ingrained that in 19th century we have these two distinct and competing communities within the Muslim society.
Mr. Hamdani, I get your point. Now my 2 points, whether you agree or disagree. First, that Sheikh Makhdoom Sahab, sorry. Mr. Hamdani, 2 points, whether you agree or disagree with me. First, Makhdoom Sahab is not against Shia and Iraqi is not against Sunnis. Yes or no?
I mean,
because it's the impression I get from your book.
I would say that within popular history and within textual history, as far as Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom is concerned, he is projected as a revivalist of Sunnis against the aggression of the Shias. This is a part of our textual understanding, and it comes primarily from principal disciples of Sheikh Hamza Makhdoom, which also includes Baba Dawud Khaki, Khwaja Ishaq.
I'm coming to Baba Dawud Khaki.
But the question is, where do you locate the Nur Bakhshis? Now, historically, you can't actually say how situated were the Nur Bakhshis within the Shia system. Because as an order, the Nur Bakhshis are an offshoot of the Kubravis. So Sayyid Muhammad Nur Baksh is the disciple, is the Khalifa of Khwaja Ishaq Khatlani. Khwaja Ishaq Khatlani is himself the son-in-law as well as the one of the principal Khalifas of Mir Sayyid Ali Hamdani.
Later part of your chapter 2 in the book.
No, I don't even have to go into it. What I'm trying to say is the competition that you would like to project, is it I would say anti. It is a pro for a certain community, which is your community. And how do you define it? To a certain extent, if you see texts, tazkiras coming from the Surwadi circles, yes, they have an idea that they are competing against a Shiite discrimination, which is happening during the period of the Chak Sultanate.
Coming to Babu Daud Khaki, you write that Daud Khaki and another disciple of Maghdum Saab went to Mughals against the Czechs. Explain this story to me.
I mean, it's a part of our textual understanding of history that how do you locate Baba Daud Khaki's approach to the court, and the issue is the execution of Qazi Musa, who's revered among the Kashmiri Sunni communities as Qazi Musa Shaheed. I think that is the pivot in the history wherein there is a disillusionment in the scholarly religious ulama class and also the mashaykhs associated with the Sunnis with the Chak, and then they approach Akbar for this. As far as Sheikh Yaqub Sarfi is concerned, I think this is one single involvement of his that we know about the political things happening in Kashmir. He spent a greater part of his life outside Kashmir. He was well connected to Mughal court, and in Muntakhab Tariq, Badaini does mention that both Humayun as well as Akbar had great deal of respect for Sheikh Yaqub Sarfi. I mean, he's one of the great scholarly figures that we have from Kashmir in medieval period. So, I mean, this is one single incident wherein we have this notion that he was approached by Baba Dawood Khaki and rest of the disciples to as a sort of a medium through which to approach the Mughal court. So, basically, this is a period wherein Kashmir is unraveling as it is.
If I remember correctly, you have also written how Yaqub Chak, I guess his son, Yusuf Chak's son, Yaqub Chak, how he actually ran from, he did not fight the Mughals, but he ran when he should have been in the middle of everything.
It's Yusuf Shah. I mean, Yusuf Shah, it's Yusuf Shah. I think generally the impression that history gives you about Yusuf Shah is that he is a Ayash. He is a person who's far more interested in a certain different ease of life. So fighting with Mughals would have been an issue for him. Also, I think he's also pragmatist. He realizes the fact that what is happening in this period is that there's a consolidation of Mughal rule in India, in South Asia. So irrespective of who would be ruling Kashmir, in the Mughal imagination, Kashmir was always a part of the Mughal Empire because khutbah had been read in the name of Humayun in Kashmir. So this is an empire with all the resources of a vast, militarily superior, economically superior empire, which is expanding all across South Asia. It's a period which follows the consolidation of Mughal rule in South Asia. So Kashmir, I would say one way or the other, would have become a part of the Mughal Empire, given the political situation of that particular period. It happened at a certain period wherein there was also certain tensions within Kashmir's internal society that is different. But basically, I would say that the conquest of Kashmir was something that was always in the happening.
I'm coming to the conquest of Kashmir. Again, the popular narrative, the popular history that is going on is that that Mughals captured Kashmir in 1585. While, as you write in your book, that actually Mughals first tried to annex Kashmir in 1533 under Mirza Haider in the name Sultan Sayyid Khan, and then again in 1540 on behalf of Humayun. So the popular myth that Mughals actually invaded Kashmir in 1885 is wrong.
It's wrong. I mean, again, as I said, this is not a book about medieval Kashmir, so I've not dealt in detail with it. The first invasion happens during Akbar's time. He sends one of his commanders to conquer Kashmir, but then he is not able to do it. So this, I would say, is where Kashmir is situated on the borderland, and you have the centralized empire expanding from the plains, and there is always going to be this fact. Remember that even in the period of the Lodis, there were always warring factions at the Kashmiri court who would always approach the kings or the sultans or the Padshahs in Delhi for help to acquire the throne. So Delhi always had that interest in Kashmir because of the fact that the central authority of the sultan was waning, and this is as we come to the period following the Sultan Faisal Shahmidis, so during the war between Fatah Shah and Muhammad Shah. So there is this you would say the loss of prestige of the Sultan, and there are competing amirs and nobles who are vying for power with helping one prince against the others. So in that, there always this insistent appeal to the court at Delhi, because that's our nearest southerly neighbor, powerful neighbor, the Sultan of Delhi, for aid into those soldiers. So there is an interest in Delhi, but then again, after Mirza Haider has been able to rule for 11 years, there is this notion that Kashmir is now part of the Mughal Empire. And here,
so it was a gradual process.
It is a gradual process, and then again, the fact is that even the Mughal Empire, you find that after the return of Humayun from Persia, then the collapse of the Suris, there is this initial period in Akbar's reign when he is under the tutelage of Bayram Khan. Then he sort of Adham Khan. Then he comes out of it, and the Akbar is actually ruling a young, ambitious emperor in his own name. So he wants to acquire territory. So it's happening all across South Asia, and this is a process that continues down through the Mughal coast till Aurangzeb reign, where the central authority is from, the imperial authority is from. So it is sort of subsuming these regional sultanates either in the south or, in our case, in the north.
You have also told in brief as far as the Pashmina shawl business is concerned in your third chapter, I guess. And then you quote British diplomat Moorcroft. You quote French traveler Victor Jacquemont, and you quote another visitor, Foster or something. George Foster, something like that. So it was actually the Iranian base for the Kashmiri shawl business.
Not only Iranians. I mean, if you see some of the records, you find mention of Turkish, Armenian, Georgians,
yes.
as well as Iranian. The Iranian seems to be substantially larger presence because of the fact that there is certain cultural affinities, and also in terms of geography, it's the nearest big empire to the empire of Hindustan or the Duranis. As we come to the later part of the 18th century, 17th century, and the early part of the 18th century. So yes, there is this large Iranian presence, and we have material evidences of that in terms of the books that were written in Kashmir, the sort of the codexes, the maktutas that were written in Kashmir, the copies of Quran that were specially written in Kashmir for Iranian merchants. I remember last year or last year there was a Quran which was auctioned at Sotheby's. And it was written in Kashmir for an Iranian merchant from Isfahan, and I think it sold for a whooping 1.4 or 1.5 crores. So, I mean, there are these material evidences and traces all across. Again, if I remember it correctly, somewhere in 1880s, there is a cable which goes from the ambassador, the British ambassador in Tehran, to the viceroy, where he mentions about the fact that there's a community of 700 or 800 Shalabafs, Kashmiri Shalabafs, who are residing in the shrine city of Mashhad. So that again shows about the movement of people. Yes, it is there.
But then again, the friction is still there between Shia merchants and the Sunni merchants. While this business was flourishing in 1800s.
No. I mean, you can't say there's a friction. For a merchant, you cannot compete in an area wherein it's not socially or politically fragile for you.
I'm coming to this point only because it's these traders which then bind us together. That's the later part.
So I mean, again, if you see, there are texts which speak. Again, Foster, he is here during the period of an Afghan governor. He says that the Iranian traders are looked after well by the Afghans, and generally our assumption of the Afghan period is that it is one of decay, misrule, and tyranny, outright tyranny. But then he says that we have these merchants who are based in Srinagar, and these are Iranian merchants, and the Afghans sort of are very tolerant of their presence, primarily because of money. So, I mean, if you look overall, the whole premise of the book to a certain extent is all about power. Power, whether it's in terms of religion, power, whether it's monetary, how that can be used to negate through the issues of identities. The book is primarily about the identity. It's not about a faith per se. It is basically about identity and how do you project that identity, and what are the characters and the play of those characters in sort of making a play for that identity in a social space.
Talking about diaspora, and Awadh has been a major center for that. Again, the Kashmiri Shia minority and the Kashmiri Pandit minority. This is what your book says. This is what you have written in the book. Explain to me how Awadh has been in pivot as far as the Shia community is concerned.
I mean, Awadh is again, as you see the steady decline of the Mughal Empire or the prestige of Delhi, you have these regional centers in which you have Hyderabad and in which you have Awadh. Bengal, not so much, which try to recreate that sense of Mughal cosmopolis. Area wherein you celebrate art, culture, it's everything that is associated with the Mughal culture.
But you
But do listen, do listen. The question is, the Awadh Nawabs are also Shia, that faith. So there is a steady flow of Shia scholars. So this is a period which is Afghan period, later Mughal period. One of the founders of Awadh kingdom was also the Subadar, the governor for Kashmir. And once he left Kashmir, there is a record which says about many people, mostly Shias from Zadibel, accompanied him and became a part of his army. So this is somewhere during the 18th century.
but you also
But then, when we come towards the 19th century, wherein there are repeated riots in the city, which is targeted against the Shias, you find there is a steady flow of Shiite scholars who are basically well versed in the Usuli tradition. And if you understand, there is a split within the Shiite school between the Usulis and the Akbaris. Most of South Asia is Akbari at that period, which is again in the formation of the Awadh state. But for some reason, because of the contact that Kashmir had maybe with some of the scholars from Iran, Kashmir is a center of the Usuli school. So the scholars who arrive in Awadh from Kashmir are mostly trained in Usuli school, and they help in propagating the traditions of Usuli school in Awadh. But then there is also a migration of Kashmiri Pandits, which starts earlier, but that happens all across. They were a part of the Mughal Empire, they were a part of the Hyderabad, they are everywhere, wherein basically what you are looking for is a scholarly knowledge and administrative knowledge. And for that, the Pandits were also accepted even in the Kabul kingdom. They rose to high positions in the Kabul, under the Afghans also. They found presence all across. There is also a Sunni presence in Awadh, which is basically of the physicians, the Hakim. Some of the leading physician families in Awadh are from Kashmiri Sunni community who also migrated there. But yes, this is one period wherein you would find the patronage. It's all about patronage in the end, isn't it?
Before we come to the last chapter of the book, I again got to remember one of the anecdotes that you have mentioned in your book is about those two brothers and sister, or I guess from Fateh Kadul, that family, where a Hindu, where a Kashmiri Pandit, Zadibal, where a Kashmiri Pandit used to live with them, and once both the brothers were out of the house, and then this thing. Explain the entire story. What actually happened?
I mean, it is basically not a story. I mean, where do you connect it? The anecdote refers to the fact that the Shias had to mediate their presence within the Hindu court, but with the overwhelming majority Sunni presence in the city. How does it take effect? So this is basically an event which works towards the organization which was set up by the Shias known as the Anjuman-e-Imamiyya. It was set up by Maulvi Haider Ali. To a large degree, the Anjuman sort of tried to replicate what was done by Mir Waiz Rasul Shah Sahab. In a way, it's the part of that period wherein you are trying to accommodate the colonial narratives and you're trying to come with a response. So at that period, we have the Anjuman-e-Imamiyya, which is set up by Maulvi Haider Ali Ansari. They do collect the money, but this is a case wherein all the resources that they collected, the financial resources of the Anjuman get exhausted in one single case, which is basically wherein the Shia is accused of killing a Pandit.
Then they again revive it after.
Then it happens later on. That happens when we come to the period which is when there is this coming together of the two communities as a Muslim collective.
Mr. Samdani, enough of fighting, enough of quarreling, now the brotherhood. And then comes this fear, the annual business pilgrimage. Explain to the viewers how actually it helped both the communities to come together.
What? I mean, I didn't get it.
The fear that the last chapter, when the business, Kashmiri businessmen used to go to the other parts of the other parts of the South Asia, where they met with other communities, and it was this the business travels where Shia and Sunni got together.
I never make that assertion.
Yes, it's
I don't.
when you talk about Mr.
I'm,
Shawl.
I do talk about shawls, but I don't talk about this assertion that this is because of the fear
Yeah,
that they come together. I don't make that assertion. I'm just making a reading.
hypothetical,
No. I'm just saying this is an event which happens, and this is an event.
which actually brought two communities
No,
together.
fear nothing had to do with it. That's nothing to do with it. It is basically the elite of the communities who come together with the view and understanding that they are working against a discriminating Hindu court. Not fear. Fear has nothing to do with it. I mean, it is a accommodation that happens at many levels. Yes, it's a part of the accommodation is when the Khajrans of the city from the two communities, the traders and the merchants, etc.
But you have mentioned two people who played a major
Yeah, that
important
is
role
not.
in
That's nothing to do with fear. That is later on. I talk about Aga Sayyid Hussain Shah Jalali and Khwaja Saaduddin Shawl, who basically worked towards securing a unified Muslim interest, which is being seen as being oppressed under the Hindu Dogra Darbar. So that is an engagement which happens at the Darbar. Both are Darbaris. One is a Zaldar, one is a trader, a merchant. Not both. They are not both merchants. One is a Zaldar. Hussain Shah is a Zaldar. Shawl is a renowned merchant.
But didn't this field play an important role?
No. It had nothing to do with it. I mean, it had nothing to do with the coming together of the communities. Remember, these two are the part of your I could normally say the Khaj class, the elite class. Fear was not something that was engaged by the. It's the second rung of the merchants, not the top rung. The coming together comes because of the elite. Fear is a trade circuit. It even happens today now. I mean, it's basically the second rung of the merchant classes who are sort of operating on their own. So they function in their own community spaces. It's nothing that it relates to it. So no, but yes, we have these two figures, and I would say primarily Khwaja Saaduddin Shawl. He should be celebrated rightly as the founding figure of Muslim freedom struggle in Kashmir. His role, I mean, I think someone should ideally write about him. He's a figure who's much ignored, and then he is also the figure who works towards this sort of coming together of the Shias and Sunnis, and this shows a very progressive mindset at a time period we are speaking about. This is again later period of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century.
Both of these two figures shall get the recognition of
bringing the communities I think there are many other people also. Let's see. In terms of, as I mentioned, there's a small publishing house by the name of Ghulam Muhammad Noor Muhammad, Kutub Farosh, a prominent house, a very big house in the sense that the way they were able to give voice to Kashmiri literature, they were able to also give voice to Islamic literature. They take out a number of issues wherein they are celebrating Shia poets. Now, this is a Sunni publishing house. They are giving a voice to Shias also. So
this is, you have mentioned.
Yeah. So basically, there are many things that are happening. It's basically slowly. I mean, any process is an evolutionary process. Conflict can happen at a certain single moment and point, but to overcome it, I mean, it needs a concentrated engagement, a certain understanding. Again, to a certain extent, that engagement can never end. It has always to be there. So, yes, these are two figures, as you rightly said, who should be celebrated.
And given the due recognition.
Yeah, I mean, someone should do a PhD on it, ideally. That's what I would say.
And we hope that someone goes and reads about and research about both the figures.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, because the question is that there are not that many archival sources, textual sources that are left there, but still there are some people who have these embedded oral traditions, narratives within them. If you collect them, if you tabulate them, this would be something really good. I think they did this, there was this book, Unspoken Heroes. I think Zahid Saab had published or something, which was again about the freedom struggle and commemorating some of the unnamed, unspoken, uncelebrated heroes of Kashmir.
Dr. Sheikh Shaukat has also written one book on unsung heroes.
So these are basically people that they need to be celebrated. And their role.
Mr. Hamdani, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for
Thanks.
this intriguing and wonderful interview.
Thank
Let me hold your book once more for our viewers. Everyone must read and buy this book, but unfortunately it's very costly. The book goes by the title Shi'ism in Kashmir by Hakim Samir Hamdani. Do read it and check it out. Thank you. Please subscribe to our channel Reportage and press the bell icon to remain updated.